Hi, I'm Jason Fisk.
And I'm Mike Tarsella of Team National. Our group finished fourth in the MarkStrat simulation over the summer session. We started the contest first overall, and we held a position of either first or second 3 times during the course of the simulation. But we ended the competition a disappointing fourth overall in share price and third overall in unit sales after faltering in the course's final week. And we really thought we would have a far better showing, so we're not happy with that result.
We started with our Noon and Nova products, which focused on shoppers and high earners markets. In period 4, we decided to add Nolo to target the savers market, and later our Note/Knox product that focused on explorers.
Noon was our bread and butter product for most of the 6-week game. Due to our misfortune in period 6, it accounted for all of our profit. And as we began the simulation, we found success really as this product most closely aligned with shoppers' ideal values. After a little bit of a slow start, we initiated an R&D project for Noon in the second period, closely matching shoppers' expectations in this segment, especially on power and price. And it worked. We gained significant share in short order. Noon was the runaway product leader overall by period 4. We sold 1.5 million Noon units overall, far more than our closest competitor, even though we lost some share toward the end. Nova began the simulation most closely aligning with the high earners' ideal values. It held the number 1 or number 2 market position in this segment up until the final period. And we were able to charge a slightly higher price than our competition because it was a high quality product. Unfortunately, we made several mistakes in period 5, which we'll talk about shortly. But Nova ended the period a distant number 3 in the high earners market, and it detracted from the overall performance in the final period. Next is Nolo, our offering in the savers market. We started this as an R&D project in period 3. Our strategy was to align with customer expectations based almost entirely on product and price. We attempted to create a very low-priced, high-powered product that we thought would take share. But after 3 periods of positioning and repositioning this product, we were never competitive here, and we finished a distant 5th.
Lastly, there's our Note/Knox product, which targeted the explorers market. We'd taken out a loan in period 3 to fund this R&D project, and everything looked like we were going to be able to take big share here because the dominant player didn't have a product that was aligned with the market expectations. But by the time we released the product in period 4, another team had already launched a successful product that quickly grabbed market share with their first mover benefits. Because of this, we were never a big factor in this fairly small market niche.
Next, let's look at the top 10 lessons we learned specifically from our MarkStrat experience. Number 1, it pays to aggressively go after the most attractive market. That's what we did with Noon with great success. With a cumulative growth rate in the mid-20% range, this market segment dwarfed the others in unit sales by period end. Lesson number 2, really counter to lesson number 1. Don't spend a lot of money on markets with little to no growth. Speaks to what we did with Knox. We underestimated the risk of not doing well enough in a lackluster explorers market. There's simply no rising tide to lift your boat there. Lesson 3, even very price-sensitive shoppers can perceive your product as cheap. Again, our goal with Nolo was to focus almost entirely on high power and low price and not worry about any of the other factors. And that just didn't work. We'll delve into that just a little bit later on in the presentation. Lesson 4, and it's a saying used by traders, cut your losses and let your winners ride. We repeatedly made the mistake of thinking we could fix Nolo and Knox, our savers and explorers offerings. And honestly, we would have been better to realize early on that we couldn't play catch up there and pump more money into Noon. Lesson 5 is to get a lead and keep a lead in this game. In hindsight, we should have taken out a bigger loan and started our R&D project at least 1 period sooner. This market, I think the market will often reward you for taking big risks, but those risks are likely to pay off when you have the first mover advantage, and we really didn't in some of our offerings. Lesson 6, consumers' product expectations do change over time. So you need to prepare for that by predicting where the mood of the market is headed. Lesson 7 is more is not always better. Just because consumers are choosing products based on particular factors, say power and price, you can't just turn all of those to 11 and think you're going to win. Lesson 8 is do not skimp on the ad research. We know this now. We did that, or we tried to do that in periods 4, 5, and 6, 4 and 5 in particular, and that hurt us. Lesson 9, make sure you strike gold at least twice in this game. We needed at least 2 outright segment leaders to win the competition, and unfortunately, we only had the 1. Finally, lesson 10 is to seek advice. We simply got too confident after taking the big lead in period 4, and we didn't ask for any more advice from the professor. We weren't reading blogs, and I think that hurt us.
Now let's take a look at what we learned in the simulation regarding the key areas of marketing management. Concerning targeting, Chapter 7 taught us that we can't be all things to all people. Mark Stratt took this a step further. We learned that market segments may share some characteristics, but they are distinct for a reason. With Nova, we made the big mistake of going after 2 segments late in the simulation. We were correct in analyzing these 2 distinct groups were coming closer together in terms of ideal values, but what about psychographics, their attitudes, personalities, lifestyles? These 2 groups were segmented for a good reason, and we shouldn't have targeted them together. We lost an amazing amount of share by trying to target both segments at once. Our high earners market share went from the mid-20s range to less than 3 in a single period, and we didn't gain nearly enough in the professionals market to make it worth our while. Regarding segmentation, Chapter 7 lecture taught us that when we define a segment, we need to ask these questions. Does the segment have definable characteristics? Can customers be profitably persuaded to buy our product? And is the market opportunity large enough? We should have looked back at this lesson before entering the explorers market. The segment wasn't big enough to justify the cost of entry. We did poorly there, and I think we could have, even if we had put more money towards advertising commercial spend, I think our result would have been the same. As far as product goes, we learned in Chapter 9 the importance of keeping our products distinct and your message sharp. We did that well with Noon, and to a lesser degree with Nova, but we failed to do this with our 2 other offerings. Regarding Nova, there were some product stories that we could have told better. If we had a chance to do this simulation over again, we would focus a lot more on points of differentiation, especially as the product matured. A lot of our competition focused on building up power and price of their products with RNG projects, but we think power and price became points of parity, especially with the introduction of LOVA in the high earners market. The real point of differentiation for our product was its superior design. It also had a pretty good display. Looking back, I think we could have touted our points of differentiation a little bit more. Our biggest product challenge, other than managing R&D projects, was trying to gauge customer demand and set production targets. We'd start with a baseline, but it was difficult to figure out how much share we would take or lose. We did a better job of this with Noon, but that was largely due to the law of large numbers working in our favor. Our production could be off by tens of thousands of units, but it'd still be within 20% of the unit sales.
And we didn't do that really well with the other products, Jason. I do want to focus, shift gears and talk about price in Mark Stratt just a little bit. We learned back in week 3 that in order to sell, you need to convince customers that your product's benefits are greater than the costs. And we did that early in the contest and then lost sight of it a little bit later on. I would say we did have a clear pricing objective for each one of our products. We went after share with Noon. We focused on current profit with Nova, and we used a low price point with Nolo and a market price point for Knox. We also differentiated our pricing policies pretty well. For example, with Nova, we kept a slightly higher price, and we're very careful not to start a price war there because our per unit costs were pretty high relative to the competition. Again, where we messed up was in focusing on price to the detriment of benefits. When we redid Nova, high earners saw that product as cheap. This after we spent a lot of effort in a lot of periods to be seen as the Cadillac offering. And as a result, we wrecked our brand image. And then with savers, the bargain hunters out there, we tried to undercut everyone on price, but far too much. Instead, we should have priced the product in line with what customers expected to pay, focus on our benefits, and I think we would have sold more.
Now let's talk a little bit about place. Let's start with the distribution channels. Overall, our goal was to keep our commercial spending roughly in line with the competition. For the most part, we did that. We were very competitive with the top teams, even though we ended the competition with 3 products instead of our competition's 4 or 5. But in terms of overall spend, we didn't do a good job keeping up. We let Team L back in the game, and this is partly because they ramped up their spending on commercial salespeople, especially in the mass merchandisers market. We finished 3rd overall in mass merchandiser channel spending, and we should have been number 1. Let's also take a look at our coverage. We could have focused a little more on our distribution KPIs found in our company scorecard. This chart pretty much explains the missed opportunity in distribution. We lost no sales in periods 1 through 3 because we had plenty of coverage. Our coverage continued to build through period 4, and then we began to lose sales because we couldn't keep this as a competitive advantage. Lastly, let's focus on inventory. The one good thing we did was not lose many sales due to not making enough product. The only time that happened was period 3. In all other periods, we were fine. We did, however, let our inventory holding costs build in the later half of the competition. In retrospect, we could have been more successful if we were focused on these KPIs.
All right, lastly, let's talk about promotion, especially advertising. That's kind of what it means in the Mark Strat world. We did fairly well with advertising until we were outspent late in the game, especially by Team L. And you could see that what they were doing with ad spending correlated with their share price, unfortunately. But let's focus on what we did well. Early on, we built awareness for all our products, and we supported each one of them with a healthy enough budget relative to the competition. And with Nova, we were smart. We addressed our ad messages. We had a perceived value problem with Nova very early on, and we addressed it with our advertising to the point where we really had completely overcome it. But our biggest mistake was not spending more to protect our Noon franchise, again, our bread and butter. If we did nothing else, we could have locked up the competition by more heavily promoting our #1 brand. And we knew this, and yet we compromised Noon by promoting our upstart brands too aggressively. We were concerned that 80% of our target market already knew about Noon, so we should focus on brand awareness elsewhere. But as we learned as we went along, advertising is more than just building awareness. I would say we could have and should have spent more on ad research in general throughout this competition. This could have helped us counter campaigns from a number of our competitors, especially Solo as they came on in the shoppers market. The only market where we truly wasted advertising dollars was Nolo, our savers offering. And in particular, we made a pretty big mistake in period 4. We thought we would announce our offering to the world, spend $3 million or so on advertising the first year, price the product lower than everybody else, and boom, would nail it. But we didn't explain why we were any different. Just going after awareness against entrenched competitors was a mistake. This did nothing to take share away from Locke, the ultimate champion in the savers market. So to sum up our experience with Mark Strat, we faltered late in the game. Our competition did a better job of focusing on price and the other 4 attributes, especially in the final weeks. But we did learn a lot, and I would say that we arguably learned more than some of the teams that did a little bit better than we did. For Team National, this is Mike Tarsella.
And this is Jason Fisk.